Hey y'all, it's Linda. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I want to talk about the ones that got away. So these are eyeshadow palettes that were either discontinued or limited edition that I never got my hands on, and I'm still a little bit salty about it, okay? I just want them in my collection. I just want to hug them as I go to sleep each night. I really don't think that's too much to ask. Like, what the hell, brands? But what I also want to talk about are a few palettes that I do have in my collection that were either discontinued or limited edition that I'm still salty were discontinued because I want all of you to have them, and I don't understand why they're not available anymore. But we're going to get into all that, but I do want to say that the thing that kind of spurred the idea for this video, besides the fact that I've seen a ton of other YouTubers do things like this, Samantha March did one, Lauren May Beauty definitely did one, but there was a palette that I have had on my wish list forever. I've had it on my wish list for literal years, and I just kept saying, okay, you know what? Someday I'll get that. Someday I'll invest the money. Someday. And then I found out that it was discontinued. I'm sure you've all been there. I'm sure you've all done that. But in this case, I was just like, okay, well, that really sucks. But I happened to walk into Sephora the other day and they still had one left. So I bought myself the Natasha Denona Gold palette, and this was just discontinued, and I couldn't resist it. You know the price of Natasha Denona palettes. I don't have to tell you the cost of this one, but it's up my alley. It's up my alley 100%. All these golds, all these luscious browns, all these coppers, these chromes. I did this look today with it. I'm madly in love. If I can find it anywhere online, as with all of these things that I'm going to be talking about today, I will list it in the description box down below. But if I can't find a link for it, I'm just not going to list it because I don't want to tease you all. But I want you to let me know in the comments, what is the palette that got away from you? So absolutely let me know. But let's first get into my list of palettes that I'm bitter that I will never have in my collection. We are going to start with the Dose of Colors Desi and Katie Friendcation palette. I was so on the fence about this palette when it first came out. I kept looking at it and looking at it and looking at it because they did have it in store at my Ulta where I would go and just stare at it longingly. But I wasn't sure. I was on the fence. But then I started seeing the looks coming out with this palette. And by the time that I was incredibly sold, it was also sold out. The color story in this was not only just stunning, but the mix of textures in this palette is really what got me. There were those beautiful foiled metallics, but also those creamy, buttery, smooth matte colors. I am so upset that I didn't get this one. And to be honest, I put out a poll on my Twitter and I think on my Instagram as well, as like, what is the palette that got away? And this was, I think, at the very top for all of you too. So I know I'm not alone in this one. That palette just, oh, I should have gotten it. Why didn't I get it? Why? The next one that I'm pretty bummed about, I would say it got away, but again, I just dragged my freaking feet because it's not that it sold out instantly or anything like that. This is the Lunar Beauty Moonspell palette. There are a lot of dark, yummy, grungy tones in this one, and I don't know that I would be able to create a single look out of just this palette, but that's not necessarily a deal breaker for me. But the color story in this one, I feel like was so unique in that the whole thing just gave off this vibe of like spooky Halloween energy. I don't know. What do you guys think? I love the way this one looks. I still haven't tried anything from Lunar Beauty, but each time that a palette comes out, I'm paying hardcore attention now, but none of them have really spiked my interest as much as the Moonspell. Especially like there is that bright, bright, bright purple and that yummy, yummy olive green. Oh my God, I wish I had gotten my hands on it. Damn it, this video is just gonna make me like upset and sad for makeup that could have, should have, would have been. So this next one, again, I must have dragged my feet. I feel like this one was actually available for years and I still didn't buy it. It was one of those where I was like, someday I'll own that, but it's not at the top of my list. But now that it's gone, I'm like, oh, damn it. Why didn't I just buy it? It wasn't expensive. And that's the ColourPop Dream Street palette. I feel like this palette especially would be really good for beginners, and that it has those neutral matte tones in there, but it also has those pops of color that would be so good on like the waterline or underneath your eyes, everything like that. And I feel like this would have been, for me, a travel palette. when I travel, and I'm not talking about when I travel to a makeup convention, that's a whole different ball game. But when I just travel in general, I don't take 15 palettes with me. I'm not that girl. I might take 1, maybe 2 palettes. And I want to be able to use those interchangeably for whatever outfit I'm wearing, wherever I'm going. And I feel like this would have been a really good palette for that. And plus, I've heard over the years that the quality of this one was like top level. Do you have this palette? Do you have the Dream Street? Is it something I should still be longing for, or is it just not that great? Okay, this next one. It's funny because I don't purchase from this brand anymore. And I may someday, because there have been some new extenuating circumstances, so to speak. But this is the Kat Von D, and it's when it was Kat Von D, not KVD Vegan Beauty, not KVD, whatever they're calling themselves now. But this was the Kat Von D Serpentina palette. Now, this palette absolutely wouldn't stand on its own. There was one matte in this whole palette, and that matte was a bright, vibrant purple. The rest of these were all just extremely beautiful metallic colors, but they were all in these really rich jewel tones. And I remember at the time really wanting it, but when this came out, I wasn't doing so well with money, to be honest. So I had to be really, really careful about my makeup purchases in general. I wasn't purchasing a ton of makeup at that time. So when this came out, I really wanted it, but I just didn't have the money for it. So then it was gone and I just never got it. But I have to admit, this one is one that I still think about often because I love how there were just bright foiled jewel tones all in one palette. And it was just so beautiful. Oh! And I know, by the way, that for any of these palettes I'm talking about, I could go, let's say, onto JD Glow Cosmetics, or I could go onto Makeup Geek and probably create something very similar myself by picking out colors individually, but I do like something about a curated palette. You know what I mean? Like, when I have eyeshadow singles, I have to admit, I just don't use them as often. Are you all the same way? I don't know. I like a palette. Even when I have like a Z palette or whatever you want to call it, and I've made my own, I just don't use it as often as a simple cohesive palette. That doesn't make any sense. Maybe one of these days I'll create my dream palette from those singles, but yeah, that's definitely one that got away. And finally, I have 2, and one of them is going to blend into the next category. I have 2 palettes that I actually owned and got rid of, and I'm sort of kicking myself for now that they're gone, and they're just gone, and you can't get them back. One of them, let's just jump right into it. One of them is the Sugar Pill Cold Chemistry palette. So this was just a quad. I mean, it wasn't a quad in the traditional sense that it was, 4 shadows this way. It was a longer palette, but it was so delicious. I don't know another word for it. It was these deep, dark colors, this bright, shimmery purple, this dark, like black with some blue shimmer in it. And it was so, so gorgeous. And the quality was so smooth and so buttery. And I actually used it quite a bit. But again, I wound up selling that palette when I wasn't doing so hot on money at some point in my life. So I'm bummed that this one has escaped me and I can't get it back. It was so good. And what's so funny is that, like, when I do my eyeshadow, 98% of the time, it's something like this. Like, I love a gold shimmery eye. It's like my go-to. And when I'm not doing gold shimmery, I love a bright, warm sunset eye, red, orange, yellow, those fiery colors. So I think it's funny that, like, a lot of the items on the list that I wish I had are all very, very cool toned and lots of jewel tones in there. So those deep, dark purples, blues, greens. I think it's interesting that those are the ones that I lust after the most. Therapist would have a field day with me. Now for the next one, again, this is a palette that I sold and I got rid of. And I'm not kicking myself so much for that, but this is where we're going to start the category of palettes that I do own, but that I wish that you all could have access to, and I'm sad about it. Now, why would I say I own it if I sold it? Because I'm putting 2 together, okay? And I'm talking about the Melt Vita and Muerte palettes. I did sell the Muerte palette. I'm sorry, I know a lot of you hate me for that. But I sold the Muerte palette because I wasn't using it as much as I knew I should have been. And so many people were after that palette and they wanted it so badly that I was like, you know what? It's not getting enough love in my house. In somebody else's house, it's going to get some love. But the Vita palette is the one that I couldn't let go of personally because this color story is everything to me. Now, I do know that Melt has sort of brought this palette back several times as like, oh, last chance, we found a box that has 50 of them or something, go grab it now. So if this is a palette that you're still interested in, again, I'm going to list it below if it's still available. If it's not, I'm really sorry, but keep your eye on like the Melt website, because this tends to come back every, 6 months or so. They will find some of them randomly. And I know a lot of you are hoping the same thing happens with the Muerte palette, and I hope so for you too. But I love this color story, and I'm so bummed that like not everyone can have their hands on it. Now, I understand with some limited edition packaging and whatnot that there are licensing issues. Like, for example, when Melt did their Beetlejuice collection, they were only able to license that for a certain amount of time. So that's why they can't just sell it forever. But these, I genuinely don't understand. Like, I don't understand limited editions sometimes. I really don't, because this is selling, okay? It's selling a lot. You're proud of your formula, everything like that. Like, why would you just discontinue it? Why would you only make it available to a certain amount of people? Because also, as a company, do they know how much money they could make if they re-released the Vida and Muerte palettes, like as a set or whatever it might be? They could make so much money, hand over fist. So I don't understand it. Someone explain it to me. Explain it in the comments below if you are a makeup connoisseur. I don't get it. Let's stick with the same brand. So another one from Melt Cosmetics that I am genuinely crushed that not every single person in the world can have in their collection is the Gemini palette. I didn't even know this was being discontinued until someone was like, oh yeah, that's been gone. I knew it had sold out. I had heard it had sold out, but this is my favorite palette of all time. I don't know. It's up there. This one, obviously, it looks brand new because I have a backup. That is how much I'm obsessed with this palette. This is a grunge dream. There is no palette that does grunge as well as this one. I'm putting my foot down and I'm making that claim. I'm stomping under my chair. You can't see it, but I'm stomping. But there's a great mix of shimmers in here. There's a great mix of mattes. All of the mattes are extremely pigmented and not dusty. This is the stuff that dreams are made of. And I'm just mad that not all of you can have this. I'm mad, and I need them to bring it back. And I need every single one of you to buy it, okay? Now this one might be, I was gonna say controversial, but I don't think anyone's gonna get super heated about it. But I think a lot of people are going to agree with this one being discontinued, whereas I still do not. And that is the original OG Urban Decay Naked palette. And yes, this is very old. I'm very well aware that it is past any expiration date it had ever had. Does that say 6 months? Oh, wow. I probably bought this a decade ago, something like that. And I know they came out with the Urban Decay Naked Reloaded, but I don't think it holds a candle to this one. To this day, this is still, like, you can tell how much I've used this palette and continue to use this palette. I genuinely feel like this was such a cult favorite for a reason. There was such a good balance of colors in here, and I feel like they genuinely worked for any eye color, for any skin tone. I just love this palette, and I don't feel that the Naked Reloaded was a good dupe for this, if you want to call it a dupe, or if you want to call it a good replacement. I don't feel like it was a good replacement. I still feel like this one is leaps and bounds above that one, and I'm bummed that you guys can't get it. Like, I'm really bummed. All right, I have 2 more that I have in my collection that I hope maybe someday you all can too, if you don't already have it. One of them, I love this palette so much more than I thought I would, and that is the Collidos Club Nebula palette, and this was in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist, and I was not expecting to love this. And it's so funny because all the palettes that I talked about in my ones that got away category, like I said, they were all like deep jewel tones and everything like that. Look at this. Look at all these deep, yummy jewel tones. But then you've got these shimmers that like are just so next level metallic. I cannot. But in addition to the shimmers, these mattes, like, look at the pigment on that. Look at the incredible, I can't even fathom how good this is. I don't even have the words. But essentially, I was really bummed. I thought this one was going to be permanent. I was a little surprised that it wasn't. I adore this palette. I've dipped into this so much more than I thought I was going to. When I first opened this, I thought it was really, really beautiful. But I was like, I'm probably going to use that like once every couple months. No. I use this so often. This red down here, this purple, that green, and that gold are the ones that I use the most. Actually, I have used this one up top, this Firefly, as a sort of topper. But yes, this, and this are the colors I use the most. It's so beautiful. And that packaging, the packaging is just, Oh, I love it so much. I hope this comes back. I hope. And then one more that I am genuinely shocked was not permanent. I don't understand why it wasn't permanent, because I know that the influencer this was in collaboration with would want this to be permanent. I know that the company would probably want this to be permanent. I don't understand. And that's the ColourPop and Raw Beauty Christie at Forest Sight palette. Again, with the deep jewel tones. I guess unpredictable. I guess I'm more predictable than I thought, but I love this color story. So again, you've got those yummy jewel tones, but you've got this like fiery mustard yellow, a bright burnt orange. You've got these two metallics that are perfect. I'm sorry, you do have one metallic down here as well. I admit I don't use this one as much, but I use these two often. And this olive green with that mustard yellow. I do think though, one thing that makes me happy about this palette is I do feel that the people who wanted it were for the most part able to get their hands on it, that it came back several times. So that made me happy, but why wouldn't this just be permanent? Brands, you're frustrating the hell out of me by making things not permanent. But that's it. This is kind of a short, quick, and dirty video. I want to know, again, tell me in the comments below, what is either the palette that got away from you, the palette that you never were able to get your hands on, or one that you have in your collection that you wish everybody could have? I know a lot of big answers were like the Anastasia Mario palette, also the ColourPop Good Sport palette a lot of you wanted. There was a bunch in there that a lot of people were really rabid for, but I think Melt Muerte is the one that stands out the most, but I'm really curious, so tell me in the comments down below. But that's it. Again, if you like this video, I would love if you give it a thumbs up. That really does help out my channel. You all can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Those are all GlitterFallout. And as always and forever, you are super freaking rock stars, and I love you so much with my whole heart. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.